If I were to try and explain the appeal of long-running shonen storytelling, it would be that these are stories designed to go on for a very long
Man, that
time,
was
and so we inevitably
so
spend a
good.
much greater amount of time
I love
getting to know
Naruto
the
at the
worlds
beginning,
and
and Bleach is
characters,
always the
over the
OG.
course of which the kind of relation we form with them inherently changes. As rather than being something consumed
Hunter
and
x
moved
Hunter
on
needs to
from,
come back.
these are series that sink into our daily routine and often
Right.
become a constant, gentle, comforting background noise
That's
in the
that's
days
that's
that make up
boy,
our
you speaking
lives.
to my heart
And
right
this
now.
has been true for me for the vast majority of my life. There's rarely a time I haven't slowly working my way through one of these long running series, the best of which have become some of my favorite stories I've ever experienced. But it's also a style of storytelling that
Ooh,
seems inherently
Mugetsu, man.
detrimental to
Hey, that's
itself.
what that
Even the
anime
very
right there is
best in the
where
industry have
I
succumbed to the pressure
got
of
my name.
producing a long running weekly manga, the eventual fatigue of which has caused even the most monstrously talented authors to either drastically reduce their release schedule or suffer a long term drop in quality. And yet, there is one artist who, despite the intense lifestyle of being a weekly mangaka, still creates his story with the same energy and vigor as he did 2 decades ago, with a series that's still as loved by its fans now as it was at the heights of its popularity. That artist
Oh
is
wow,
Eiichiro
that's
Oda,
cool.
and that story is One
I wonder
Piece.
how old he was in that.
The most notable thing I could say about One Piece in the modern day is that it's still good, and sailing the Grand Blue with the Straw Hats is still a blast, with many fans attesting that the current arc is one of the best in the series' history, and I'm inclined to agree.
Dharma 60.
But the question is how? How does a series stay interesting and relevant after 20 years? And what is it that makes its
I wonder
fans
where Oda
still
is
so
pulling his
loyal to it?
inspiration from, you
And
know?
if you've never read One Piece, what could possibly make the massive commitment of it worthwhile? Well, my dear friends, the day has finally come for us to answer those questions. So let's lower the set
Alright,
out
my
towards
bad,
the
y'all had a
horizon
phone call,
and
so
talk about why you should watch/read One Piece. The
that was a
major
nice
advantage
fading
of
effect.
having a long running series is that it allows the author to communicate a much greater degree of information to the reader. And while this can often be to a series' detriment, with many artists forced to prioritize longevity over quality, in the right hands it can be used to build worlds of immense breadth and scale, ones with stories and characters that would be completely impossible in a shorter context.
Right.
And this is the primary strength of Eiichiro Oda as a writer, his ability to create and sustain a long running narrative. And one of the primary ways he does this is by grounding his series in a tangible, believable world. While One Piece is at its heart the story of the Straw Hat Pirates and their quest for the treasure One Piece, it's the detours and locations along the way that make up the primary bulk of One Piece's story.
And you know what I'm saying? I agree with that because what actually makes a good RPG is not actually the main story, but these side quests that allow for you to character build. You know what I'm saying? It's a story like Star Ocean, the second story, where you can take all your characters and they each have their own side quests, and that helps you like really understand how your characters work, whether the likable personality, their backstory, and it gives them a good foundation, and then it almost makes you want to switch up. And you know what I'm saying? This is my favorite character now. You know what I'm saying? So I agree with that.
Each new location in the journey of the Straw Hats has its own unique identity, with its own customs, cultures, economy, and inhabitants. And a huge part of the appeal of sailing the Grand Blue with the Straw Hats is uncovering these locations and discovering the mechanics of how they work. Oda has a way of giving even the most visually outlandish locations a tangible feeling of place and structure. Take, for
Hmm.
example, Whole Cake Island from the most recent arc. It's
Whole
a
cake.
magical land where every inanimate object is alive and the buildings are constructed from confectionery. And at first, it seems like a kind of Disney esque paradise, until we find out later how the island became like this. Whole Cake Island is under the control of Big Mom, a massive hulking woman with the power to steal life directly from people and transfer it into everyday objects. A power she's used to transform the island into her own distorted wonderland, where no one can leave and people must sacrifice a segment of their
I
lifespan
heard
as
Big Mom was
tax.
like one of the
This
strongest
setup alone is
characters.
already a pretty fascinating way to handle a location, but perhaps even more impressive is the detail that's gone into its creation. If you go to the One Piece wiki, you'll find pages of information about this one island alone, with detailed paragraphs on the 10 different locations that form it, including a floor by floor breakdown of Whole Cake Chateau, the home of Big Mom, including detailed descriptions of the first floor library, the fourth floor room of treasure, and the rooftop party hall. If you want to know what the
Hmm.
weather is like on Whole Cake Island, where and how the residents get their food, or why there are skeletons near the seducing woods, all that information is there for you to dig out. In other words, Whole Cake Island has a tangible sense of geography about it. It feels real because Oda has taken the time to develop it. And what's more, this is just one of the many examples of the extremely fleshed out developed locations that make up One Piece's world.
Wow.
Zou is a massive forest filled with beast people located on the back of a giant elephant, run by a fierce warrior dog during the day and an equally fierce warrior cat during the night. Dressrosa is a giant city with a massive gladiatorial arena inhabited by bizarre toy people, which are all under the heel of a vicious
Tales from the
boss king.
Hood, or
Thriller
Tales from the
Bark is a
One
giant
Piece.
haunted ghost ship that literally eats other ships and turns their crew into zombies.
Wow.
And they've all been fleshed out to a similar degree as Whole Cake Island. And it all comes together to create not just the feeling of one singular massive world, but the worlds within worlds that
Now that looked
fill
like an
One
area map
Piece's
for a
landscape.
good RPG or
And the same
MMO.
ethos applies to the many characters who populate it. No character in One Piece is ever constructed in isolation, but rather each individual one has their own allegiances, political geography, history, and driving motivators, many of whom have relationships and backstories entirely.
And like I agree with him, like when you're able to hash out those characters, that allows us as viewers to be able to really choose and pick our own favorite characters without, you know, people disagree or whatever inside of a community or whatever, but when you're allowed to do that and really have the time to hash out these kind of differences with the characters and stuff like that, it really helps the world building. So then, like in other arcs where these characters ain't missing, people are able to be like, "Man, what happened to him? What happened to this character?" And then all of a sudden that character appears, and then you're like, "Oh, okay, cool, cool." It just seems like from what I'm getting is definitely a world full of infinite possibilities as far as character development.
Isolated from our heroes, like how 100 Beast Kaido and Gecko Moria have beef with each other due to the fact that Kaido was the one who killed Moria's entire crew, forcing him to create the undead army the Straw Hats face off against in Thriller Bark. These slices of character information are often revealed through what seem like tiny throwaway lines, only to become far more relevant to the story later on, to the point that I've lost entire afternoons trawling through the One Piece wiki,
Wow.
going down rabbit hole after rabbit hole, trying to understand how all these characters fit together to create the giant, ever-evolving world that is One Piece. And the fact that Oda has had hundreds of chapters to develop the world of One Piece like this means that he's been able to evolve it into a landscape that begs to be dissected and studied. And if you need proof of this, just look at the communities that have built up around its analyzation and discussion, such as the extremely popular One Piece podcast, currently on its 473rd episode, which discusses in extreme detail each new chapter, with episodes that regularly last over 2 hours,
Wow.
meaning that even entirely separate from the central narrative of One Piece's story, it's still an utterly fascinating landscape to explore. That isn't to say, however, that the story that takes place in One Piece's world isn't vital to its success. It absolutely is. But perhaps just as important as the story Oda tells is the unique way he tells it. Oda is a master in what we're going to refer to as short-term and long-term storytelling, And to really understand why One Piece has endured over the years like it has, we need to understand his work from these two distinct perspectives. Short-term storytelling accounts for the moment-to-moment experience of consuming a piece of narrative,
Mm-hmm.
how good a job an author has
Kind
done
of
in
like
laying out
short-term
their work
memory.
that makes it pleasurable to consume. And while I can think of a few manga authors I would consider technically stronger illustrators than Oda, I can't think of any who have the same innate understanding of how to actually make reading a page of manga enjoyable. And even then, when I say there are technically stronger illustrators than Oda, that's not to take away from Oda's work as much as it is to highlight what's special about it. Rather than concentrating on intense rendering or meticulous anatomical correctness, Oda's work has a highly organic, expressive quality to it. He's a master at caricature and stylization, often accentuating the proportions and shapes of his characters to extremes for some of the most hilariously goofy but also strikingly unique designs in the industry. And yet he's also adept at depicting emotion through his drawings, namely
Yeah.
by pushing the facial expressions of the different characters as far as they'll possibly go. Joy, malice, desperation, sadness. He knows exactly how to depict the human face in order to give the reader the clearest possible conveyance not only of what a character is feeling,
Nice.
but just how intensely they are feeling it. In short, Oda is adept at conveying information through his images. And this carries right through to every aspect
That's
of
one
his
of the
manga
telling
writing, including the
things
unique
about a
way
good
he lays
artist,
out
man. They're not
pages.
necessarily
Go to
fundamentally
practically
sound when it
any
comes to
part of
artists,
One
but
Piece, and what you'll be met with
if
are
the
pages dense with visual
if the
information.
term artist
While
is
manga
like
is, of course, a visual medium, many
self-expression,
series are content
that's
to
what
let
he's
the
good at.
dialogue do the lion's share of the storytelling, with the visuals merely serving as an identifier for who is speaking or to highlight character designs. But with Oda, his pages are dense with visual data, with a lot of the world building communicated through images alone.
Is that a
Take
whale
this
tree?
page in the city of Zou, for example. At no point does anyone
Pineapple
point out
Express?
that the Beastmen use the fruit of the giant trees as their homes. That's information you only get by taking the time to explore the page for yourself. And yeah, it's a small detail, but that's kind of the
That's
point.
quite
Oda's
creative.
pages are
I don't think
packed with
any
these
artist would
little
really
visual
think about
touches,
that. I
whether
think
it's a
like that.
small gag taking place in the corner of a crowd scene, the appearance of a semi-obscure character from a previous chapter, or any number of strange, often hilarious one-off character designs.
Green tea.
Oda is an expert at cramming as much visual information into a page as possible,
I get
and
it.
that means reading and rereading through these chapters is often a surprising and rewarding experience. This
What is
visual
going on with
density
Nami?
does sometimes run the risk of becoming cluttered, especially considering the amount of text that are present at any given time. But what really helps keep this in check is Oda's command over the mechanics of how to guide a reader's eye around a page of manga. The creation
You
of
know what? I was
sequential
just
events
thinking
from
about
a
what he's
single
saying.
image is something we talked about a lot in our Genius of Dragon Ball video, but Oda may be the only author I've ever come across with as solid a grasp of this as Toriyama, and in some cases I'd say even exceeds him. Take this 1.5 page spread for example. We start off on the right with the Mink Men getting angry at Zoro, then Zoro in return getting angry back, then Luffy responding to Zoro, this dog lady adding to Luffy's response, and then an entirely different conversation taking place on the other side of the room. That's 5 sequential events from a single unbroken panel, and this creates the illusion that as our eye travels from right to left here, time is actively moving with it, which makes it feel like this is an actual event unfolding before us, and not just a group of isolated incidents.
Right.
And if you're skeptical of this, just look at how less engaging this scene is if we insert some panel breaks. The flow is lost, and so is that sense that we are observing an actual scene unfolding. Oda
Wow.
has used this technique so often and in such minor situations that it nearly seems like something he's
It does
done
look cluttered,
habitually.
but it's got a nice
But he
flow
also
to it.
pushes it in ways that I've never really seen before. My personal favorite example of this being this depiction of 100 Beast Kaido jumping off Sky Island.
Wow.
We get this panel of a silhouette standing on a massive precipice before lunging forward to the world below. We turn the page or scroll down and we get this beautifully handled piece of visual storytelling. Starting at the top right of the page, we get these 3 panel breaks, which cause our eyes to linger for just a moment, creating the very slight sense of anticipation and distance. before following the trail of Kaido's fall down through the clouds and slamming into the ground in a massive eruption that's even bigger than the island he's landed on. There is any number of more generic ways that Oda could have depicted Kaido's fall, but doing it this way serves two
Artistically,
distinct functions.
that looks
For one,
amazing.
it's just an incredibly fun page to read,
Just the
really
pure
conveying
flow
with
of the
images
page.
alone the sense of velocity and
I can
impact
appreciate that
of
as an
Kaido's
artist
massive
myself.
body slamming into the earth.
I
And
used to have
second, this
aspirations
also
about
serves
making
as Kaido's
manga.
introduction into the story, and the fact that that impact is so well conveyed and that Kaido survives it so effectively establishes his immense physical strength and stamina, and thus setting him up as the massive threat he's most likely going to become for the Straw Hats later on, and all this from not even half a page. And so, whether it's through the drawings themselves or through the actual construction and layout of his manga, there's always a sense that Oda is incredibly engaged with the visual storytelling of his work. And the result is that One Piece is a joy to consume on a page-to-page basis.
I like
the
the depth
simple act of
and
reading One
perspective
Piece
that
feels
page.
good. But it's only when Oda's expertise in short-term storytelling is coupled with his ability to write and sustain a long-running narrative that the true strength of his manga becomes obvious. One Piece is a long-running story, but I think what separates it from so many other stories of this type is that even from its earliest days, it was always designed to be this way. Oda has actually been writing different versions of One Piece since he was a child. After being inspired by the cartoon show Vicky the Viking, he would fill his school notebooks with a story he only referred to as pirate manga. And this pirate manga would eventually evolve
Wow,
into
so he
Pirate's
did.
Dawn, which would eventually evolve into One Piece. So Oda has been thinking of this narrative and world for a very, very long time. Many of even the most recent characters in One Piece have existed in Oda's mind for years. You can go back through his old interviews and see just how far-thinking the story of One Piece actually is, or even just look back at One Piece's early chapters and see the seeds that Oda has planted. For example, the character Silvers appears in a flashback in chapter 19, only to actually appear in the story and become a prominent character later on in chapter 500. And Oda constantly does this, seeding clues throughout the chapters of One Piece for us to discover and theorize over. Hell, I remember reading a blog post from 2015 that correctly predicted everything about Sanji's backstory that was revealed in the current arc, purely by virtue that his wanted poster said alive as opposed to dead or alive. Oda never feels like he's focused on just the next major arc or plot points, but
And I
instead
think
on the
that's one of the
long-running
things that
narrative
fans
One
enjoy the
Piece as a
most, that
whole.
you're able to
And that's not even taking into
theorize
account everything we
and be
don't
able to
know.
predict to see
As
if you're
many
on
of
the
the
same
threads that
page as
Oda
the
has set
manga
up during
artist.
One Piece's run, there are so many more that are left tantalizingly open. How is it
I'm
that
kind of drunk.
Blackbeard is able to utilize two Devil Fruit powers at the same time? What was the gigantic Cthulhu-esque entity that appeared in the fog in the final panels of Thriller Bark? And my personal favourite, why in a nearly 900 chapter story about pirates has not a single character ever worn an eye patch? And of course, the biggest of all, what exactly is One Piece? The fact that Oda has so continuously delivered on these long-term plans
True,
and payoffs
true.
means that
People
it's
still don't
very
know
easy
what
to
One
believe
Piece
that
is.
these are questions with answers, meaning that there is always an island on the horizon of One Piece's narrative, always a breadcrumb trail to lead you to the next major story, and discovering where these trails go and how intricately they're worked into the series overall makes reading One Piece extremely satisfying on a long-term basis. And so, One Piece is a beautifully entertaining experience in the short term, while also being highly rewarding on an entirely different level in the long
I'm
term.
actually starting
And it's
to
these two aspects together
like.
that explain why
I know
so
I did the
much of One
JoJo
Piece's
reactions, and
fan
I haven't
base
had a
has
chance to
been
really check
so
out
loyal
JoJo,
to the
but
series over the years, and also a part of why so many
the
people
covers,
have
man,
become
I
so
love manga
invested in
covers.
the characters of the Straw Hat Pirates. But before we dive into what makes Luffy and the crew so great, there's a little misconception I'd like to clear up first, and that is the criticism that One Piece has weak character writing because it lacks what people are referring to as character development. And I think it's important to draw a line here and define the difference between character development and character progression. Character progression can also be referred to as the narrative arc of a character. They start at A and eventually end up at B, and it's a powerful storytelling tool, but not one that is required for good story. Take Cowboy Bebop, for example. There is little to no progression in any of its three central characters. Jet, Spike, and Faye don't learn any life lessons or become better people, and that is kind of the point. But that doesn't mean they aren't well developed. Character development refers to how fleshed out a character is, their history, their goals, their
But
strengths, their
yeah, but
weaknesses, what their
normally when you
perspective
do
on the
character
world is, and
development, it
how they
always
came to
ends
view it
up in
that way.
something tragic
And while there isn't
or a
a
power up
great
or
degree of
something.
character progression among the Straw Hats, each and every one of them is extremely well developed. Each one with a highly distinctive personality, from the stark, indifferent Zoro shows in most situations, to Frankie, Luffy, and Chopper's inexhaustible enthusiasm for the world around them. Each Straw Hat has their own unique charm, and each one has their own compelling and often heartbreaking histories. To this date, Brook's story of his final performance for his crew is about the only time I've ever cried while reading a manga. And fuck you, I'll cry whenever I damn well please. And even then, there is character progression, it just
I've
tends to
cried.
happen
I've
very
cried too,
slowly.
man.
Just
So
look at
hey,
Usopp's
hey,
journey
we
from
here.
lying coward to
We here.
Sniper King to actual competent member of the crew. As well written as the Straw Hat Pirates are individually, however, their true appeal only comes through when they're considered as a unit, when considered as the Straw Hat Pirates. And to understand why, we need to first understand what being a pirate in One Piece's world actually means. The choice to become a pirate in One Piece means that you've essentially decided to shirk off the constraints of society, choosing to live outside world law and instead forging your own path and creating your own way of life. And forming a pirate crew means that you found a group of people willing to share in these values.
Right,
In
right.
other words, you found friends willing to accept you for who you are and who will fight for your way of life. This is the concept of nakama that is so pervasive throughout One Piece, which translates roughly to friend, comrade, or crewmate, or as the One Piece fans have come to consider it, someone who is closer than family. And
Right.
this is the bond shared by Luffy and the rest of the Straw Hats.
Yeah, you
It's
definitely
obvious
got that.
each one
You
in
know what
their
I'm saying?
own way is both proud and delighted to be part of the crew. They like spending time with each other and exploring the world together, and this is something consistently reinforced by Oda in his many coloured illustrations of the Straw Hats, most of which depict them just hanging out and having a good time. And I love these pages because they
Yeah.
really get across the camaraderie felt by these characters and the friendship they share.
I
Each
wonder
member
who
of the
could
Straw
eat
Hats also has
more,
their deeper
Goku or
reasons
Luffy.
for wanting to be
Like
part of the
who would
crew,
win in a
as each
mukbang
member
contest with
has at some
Goku and
point
Luffy?
lost someone extremely close to them, and that event usually causes them to lose their place within the world, a place they eventually only rediscover upon joining the crew. And I think this only furthers the appeal of the Straw Hats. They're a group of friends who have found each other in a massive sprawling world and who value that friendship more than anything. And over the course of One Piece, it's hard not to feel drawn into this dynamic yourself, like you aren't in some small way part of the crew. And I think
Right.
this is a primary
That's the
reason why
key
so many people
to
feel
being
such
a
a
part of any
strong
good
emotional
show.
investment
It's feeling
in the
like you're
flowing
actually there.
concept that is the Straw Hat Pirates. But it's also this same emotional investment that Oda leverages in order to create the most dramatic moments of tension and conflict within One Piece's story. While Luffy and Co face many dangers throughout their voyage, nothing ever feels as high stakes as when the unity of the Straw Hats is threatened. There's various points in the journey when, due to either external or internal factors, a member of the crew will decide to leave of their own accord, and these inevitably become some of the most emotionally impactful moments of the entire series. One such example is early on in the fantastic Water 7 arc. After sustaining repeated damage over the course of the journey, Luffy decides that it's time to condemn the crew's old ship, the Going Merry, a decision that Usopp takes umbrage with, as up until this point he has been the one maintaining the ship, but it's obvious that his actual real worry is that he too will eventually be left behind by the Straw Hats. Tempers flare and the situation quickly spirals out of control as Usopp declares to the shock of the others that he's decided to leave the Straw Hats, and it culminates in a brutal showdown between Luffy and Usopp to decide which one will take ownership over the Going Merry. It's one of the best fights of the entire series, but what always stays with me about it is the visible effect the encounter has on the rest of the crew, each one visibly shaken by the violent clash of their captain and former friend. As nothing is more upsetting to these characters than the breakdown of the family they've all grown to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautifully sad
Dang, that
episode and
almost
one
made
I
me
really
cry.
encourage
That
you to
almost made
watch
me cry a
throughout.
little bit,
It's
bro.
one of the better produced episodes of the anime, and even if you have no interest in consuming the rest of One Piece, this is a great example of how strong the character writing in the series can actually be. The other major example of how well Oda handles his characters can be seen in how he establishes the many villains of One Piece's world. In the same way he can utilize a character's backstory to establish an incredible amount of tragedy and sympathy,
That
he's
sucks.
equally capable of utilizing this same technique to create a palpable, justified sense of fear and danger within a character. My personal favorite example of this being the terrifying Don Quixote do Flamingo. Now, we spent way too much time in the last video going through a character's backstory, and this video is already insanely long, so unfortunately, we don't really have time to go through it. So, moving quickly along, god fucking damn it, okay, I can't help myself, here we go. Don Quixote Don Flamingo was born to the most elite class of family, known only as the world nobles or
He
silver
looked like
skinned
an a-hole of a
clans.
kid.
A class of people of such wealth and power that they can commit atrocities in public without any fear of legal repercussion. A young Doflamingo greatly valued this elite status until one day his father declared that the family would be abandoning their life of excess and lordship in exchange for living an honest life as regular people, and in doing so disregarded their noble status. A decision they'd come to regret. Banished from the sacred land of Merios, the family began their new life as regular citizens, only to return to their home one night to find it set ablaze. Word had spread to a nearby village about the noble family no longer under government protection, and it brought out the seething, long-term hatred its people felt for the celestial dragons. A
Wow.
hatred that took the form of a series of violent assaults against Don Flamingo and his family. Persecuted and driven from their home, the family were forced to take refuge in squalor, eating only garbage to survive. There, their father, now desperate and afraid, contacted the world nobles in the hopes of returning his terrified family to Merios. But he was met with only scorn, and he and his family were abandoned to the cruel world they had chosen to become a part of. The continuing ordeal slowly took its toll on Doflamingo's mother, who grew more ill with each passing day until eventually her life slipped away. And just as it seems like the remaining family had nothing left to lose, they were once again attacked by the scornful villagers, only this time they were captured, tied to their former burning mansion, and tortured. The experience awakened within Doflamingo a great rage, a rage that manifested itself in the form of his Emperor's Haki, which he used to subdue the villagers and save his remaining family. But at this point, Doflamingo was so consumed with the hatred for the people who tormented him, hatred for the celestial dragons that abandoned his family, and even hatred for his own father, whom he blamed for the entire ordeal. This would later result in Doflamingo killing his father and vowing to one day take everything that the celestial dragons have built up and burn it to the ground, his rage manifesting in a twisted grin as he declared war on all of existence.
Wow.
And this is the man that Luffy and the crew must face in the Dressrosa arc. This is the kind of writing that makes so many of the villains from One Piece so compelling, but also gives the eventual conflicts between Luffy and these characters such weight and drama, to the point that I would say I don't actually find the bigger fights in One Piece as well written or choreographed as encounters from other series, but it hardly seems to matter due to what an excellent job Oda has done in framing these encounters in the emotion of their characters. Take the monumental showdown between Luffy and Rob Lucci, for example. What really makes this fight work is less so the tactics or actions of the characters, but more the clashing of the two's diametrically opposed emotions and ideology. Luffy is, of course, the embodiment of adventuring and free spirit, the belief that people should be allowed to pursue their dreams without worry or
Uh-huh.
constraint.
I'm
And Rob
sorry I'm not
Lucci
talking. I'm
is the
just listening.
crushing wall of reality that stands in the way of all that. The personification of the faceless world government that seeks to regulate and control every aspect of society. And this setup lends real narrative weight to every blow of the encounter. So finally, it is of course only fair to mention what I consider some of One Piece's weaker points.
Right.
And the biggest by far is the
What
handling
the
of
freak?
anime. I do actually find it more tolerable than most, with some of the action scenes having some genuinely fantastic animation. But the production does drop a lot outside these moments, and that coupled with some truly awful pacing
Ooh.
means that it's hard to recommend the anime as anything other than a companion piece to the manga. While Oda is exceptional at creating a wide variety of characters with all
Mhm.
manner of shapes and body types, he does draw a lot of his girl characters very, very similar. And while I
Yeah,
like
yeah,
sexy
I said
characters
that
in
in the
the
opening
anime,
video.
this is one of the few areas of the series that feels phoned in. In other words, I think Oda has it in him to do better with his fan service. The pacing of One Piece can be sometimes jarring to the point that it's a little frustrating. It's common for the focus to shift from character to character, with many fights occurring simultaneously. And while this sometimes creates a great sense of spectacle and chaos,
You're right.
it can also kill the momentum of a particular encounter, cutting
Mm,
away just as things are getting heated.
right.
And again, this is a problem way worse in the anime. The biggest barrier to entry, however, has to be its extreme length. Anyone new to the series could spend months and even years trying to catch up on it, and wait many more for its eventual conclusion. But I think, in
You
a
would have
way,
to you
this
would have
is
to really
also
binge
the
watch.
series' biggest strength. When I think of what I love about One Piece and what keeps me coming back, it isn't the eventual promise of finding out what One Piece is or the conclusion to.
Like like if I ever got into One Piece now, it would take me months to catch up. You know what I'm saying? Like you could probably watch Naruto in its entirety in probably 2 months if you got a lot of time, you know. Um, but with One Piece, it's a lot different. And if they say they have a lot of fillers, there's going to be a lot of misdirection. You know what I'm saying? As far as like them taking the pacing and taking breaks from the initial story or the main story, and a lot of animes, or at least the long running ones, always had that issue where they had to keep pace or not exceed the manga, so they have to create fillers. And I think that's One Piece issue. Now, since they do have so many episodes, you could skip over. But me being who I am, I watch a filler. If it suck, it suck. But at least it was something fun to watch.
Arcs that I know are most likely dozens of chapters away, but rather, it's just the opportunity to return to this world and spend more time with these characters. To see them fight and struggle and
Yeah, and
chase
get
their dreams,
personally
and in
attached to
turn,
them.
see how the world's many moving parts react to them. This is the kind of
And
story that
you
could
know,
only be told over.
it's like it's interesting, man, because I as an artist, I started drawing Goku when I was like 11 years old, and I mean, I kept drawing it and I kept drawing. Like Goku was just such a dynamic character at that time, And Goku hasn't had he's had a lot of character progression, but not a lot of character development. So, over time, like, I've switched up like who I like as a character, and I think one of the most diverse and layered characters I've ever had to read about was Ichigo. I think Ichigo had many layers. I think Bleach itself had a lot of things to explain, and then it didn't have the time. Like, I think if Bleach had the same amount of time as One Piece, it'd be probably top two, top three animes, and especially with the art. I mean, hit the like button if you agree with me, but it's a lot of manga that manga and also anime that could have been you know, up there with One Piece, but they just didn't last. And one thing about One Piece that I'm beginning to understand is that he's had time to hash out the story and branch it out. Like if you say this is the main plot line on this branch, and these many different branches and many different storylines and side quests within the manga or within the story itself, he's had a lot of time to hash out and really give the audience something to really value and attach to. Makes it hard to break away.
For years. One carefully built over hundreds and hundreds of chapters, where each corner of its world feels realized and yet where each horizon still brims with potential. And if you're new to One Piece, this is the reason I think it's still a commitment so worth making. As it's a story to get lost in, one to grow up alongside, and one with worlds and characters that will stay with you for years to come. And this, friends, is the best reason I can think of why you should watch / read One Piece.
I hear you, brother. And I will begin my journey soon.
Friends, I want to thank you for joining me today.
And with that being said, all right, guys. Thanks for hanging out with me on that one. Seeing the character depth of the story has me really interested in watching the anime. I'm much of a story person, you know. I believe Sword Art Online is one of the best story-driven manga, even though the pacing is a little slow. But I love the story, you know, and seeing that how One Piece has such a good foundation of world building and character dynamic, it definitely does make me interested, much more interested in that than JoJo. But if there's any videos like that for JoJo, hit me up in the comments, man. Link me to the video and I'll react to them. So with that being said, post your comments down below. Let me know what you think, man. What has really what sold you into being a part of the One Piece story, and what do you value the most, and what do you get out of personally the One Piece story, man? And let me know in the comments. I'll be definitely responding to you guys, man. I want to thank you guys for sitting with me through this. Shout out to Jason Parker once again for hitting me up with the video idea. And I hit you guys at another one. Make sure you join the Discord. If you made it this far, I would definitely love for you to subscribe, man. I think once you join MugTech community, hey, you never want to leave. So, hey, I will see y'all at another one. And y'all know the slogan, man. Win, lose, stay grinding, man. We out this thing.